Yeah, I was told it was always good to do something kind of eye-catching at the beginning of a video. Well, let's get on with the real story here. We've got a removal. It's a Deodar Cedar, and it is infected badly with pitch canker disease. Unfortunately, it's a disease that's taken out a lot of trees. You can see it in the bark. The bark is starting to swell, and pitch starts oozing. This tree had lost a lot of its foliage, lots of the greenery, and it probably only had about 25% of the green foliage left. So Jorge did the climbing, and we worked together. Had a pretty tough day of it. He's pretty good up in the tree. I'm going to do something that I don't normally like to do, and that's I'm going to be somewhat critical of some of the moves that Jorge is doing up in the tree. And I'll point them out to you and explain to you why I believe they're critical. This channel is about learning, and whenever I see anything that is done as a mistake or what I believe it to be a mistake, I like to point it out, and I'm not afraid to point out the mistakes that I make or somebody in my crew makes. I certainly had a talk with him after he got down. Boy, look at that sawdust. What a mess. So far, so good. I don't see any real problems there. Glad I had eye protection on here. This tree is actually quite heavy. We did have a pretty good drop zone. And a lot of people say, why don't you take bigger pieces? Well, it was kind of on a hillside there, and we didn't want to have any logs go rolling down the hillside. Oh, here's mistake number one. Look at the shape of the bar, where it's at. Okay, he pushed that off over the bar. Now, he tilted the saw up so it didn't end up bending the bar, but I wasn't too impressed with that. There's a lot better way of doing it. I hate to say it, but sometimes Jorge gets in a bit of a hurry, and he just keeps working and working and working. And because he gets away with something, he doesn't correct his behavior. All right, now I want you to look there. There's mistake number two. He is overcutting his wedge. You see where the chainsaw bar is? He's actually cut beyond the edge of the wedge, and he is below his wedge. I mean, it's not a big problem there, and it's going to pull it off regardless. But if you're going to make a wedge cut, make it right. Know what a wedge cut is supposed to do and how to do it. All right, let's see what we got here. Now, it's hard for me to be critical because it's not easy to be up on spurs, and it's not easy to be doing this kind of work. And it's real easy for Jorge to say at the end of the day, okay, well then you do it. I do it, and I've done so many of these jobs. So he's got a wedge that he's got on a cord that he uses, but I think I've showed many times alternatives to this procedure. So there we go. Look at that. I stopped the film. He's pushing it over his bar. And in order to keep from bending the bar, he's got to lift the chainsaw up at the last minute. But you can still bend the bar. There's no reason to do it that way. What I would do is I'd put the wedge in the back and then either have a small dowel or even a small stick the right size, and you cut almost to the edge. You stop the saw, you put the small stick or another wedge in the cut near the saw, then you start the saw up again, and you cut all the way through, and then you put the saw down before you get rid of it. Now he's in a hurry. He's just trying to get everything done, and let's see what happens here. Oh, there it is again. He's pushing it without getting the bar completely out of there. I didn't check the bar, but I think it's okay. You know, he was lifting the saw up every time he was doing it, but it kind of irritated me to see him do that. Oh, there he did it again. And the irony of it is he knows better. That's kind of interesting. We reached a point where we were going to fell the log, and he decided to come down out of the tree, so he put a little bit of a notch on either side on the top. There's a mistake. He's totally reliant on that notch on the top. He disconnected his flip line because he had it caught around the rope. Was it unsafe? Well, not really unsafe, because the rope was situated pretty securely.
Taking his flip line off.
I wouldn't have done that.
You see how he's got his rope?
Honestly, I think I would have just come straight down without the rope on the top. And that's a very controversial thing to talk about. You know, he's got a double safety system. He's putting, you know, he's using the rope to wrap down, and he's coming down with the flip line, so he's kind of double tied in, and that's a smart thing to do. It's a little bit of a pain. You know, the old loggers would never do that. They would just use just their flip line. And in all honesty, I've done just the flip line a lot myself in my life. But you know, if you can be double tied in, there's nothing wrong with that. He's pretty good with that flip line there. Like I say, it's easy to be critical of someone else, but I do like to point out these they're fairly small mistakes, but they could lead to a big problem. Had Jorge bent the saw, you know, that was our best running saw. Had a brand new chain on it. It was the one that, you know, I really wanted to keep running good. We had another 44 that was in good shape too, but that was the 500i, which I think a lot of you know is my baby. So I came back the next day. That was a lot of work getting all that cleaned up. The next day, decided I was going to drop this thing, and I didn't put a tag line on top, so I had to cut a wedge that was pretty accurate. It's, you know, not super dangerous, but it was in the direction of the house, and there was a small redwood tree there that I didn't want to hit. And you know, a lot of times, I'm sure many of you guys have done this, you look at the trunk and you try to figure out where is it going to land, exactly how far is it going to go. So here's the wedge I put in there, and after looking at it, I thought, okay, I wanted to go just a little bit more to the left. So I put those little pieces in there on the side. I call those kicker pieces. And, you know, if you get your wedge just off just a bit, you can put a little bit of a wooden wedge one side or the other. And when you're making your final cut, as it's going down, it'll actually pick the log up just a hair and put it over to the direction that you want it to go. And there it goes. It did have a little bit of a roll there. It did roll down, or it did have a downhill down to the creek. It did start raining on us after this, so Jorge put up a little tarp to work on the firewood. This is cool. I spent a little bit of time hand cutting some slabs, and I don't do this very often, but if you're real careful, and you know, I actually watched a YouTube video of some guy in Mexico that did this with sandals on, and he cut some beautiful slabs. So I figured, well, I'm going to try that. We had to get rid of all the wood, so I was very, very fortunate. The woman came out and said, "Too bad we can't just pick up these logs and move them over there by the side of the driveway." And I said, "I can do that." So I went and got my bobcat. Ouch! Ouch, look at that. Ooh, I got my bobcat and I cut it into 3 sections, and I moved these logs over by the driveway. It was a little bit of a challenge. They were a little bit heavier than I could do, and here's what we ended up with. We left all the firewood, and the 3 logs, I put them together as close as I could, almost in line with the way they were put back together. Hillside wasn't quite even. Ended up building a little bench for her out of one of the slabs.